welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and today we are reviewing the final 60th anniversary special, The Giggle, the final episode featuring the 14th Doctor, and the first episode featuring the 15th, as well as the 57-year-long return of the Celestial Toymaker. It's a big episode.
A lot to unpack.
It's not lost on us that last time we kind of blitzed through the plot section really, really quickly. I dare say that's not going to be the case this time because this is a jam-packed episode. I've seen a note going around online that this would have benefited from being a two-parter, and I am inclined to agree. They gave it an extra 10 minutes on the other specials, and it definitely needed them. But I honestly think that it could have used just a little bit more time to really focus on some of the more different aspects of this plot connected to the other ones.
I'm generally in agreement there too. I mean, I remember last time I said that I was wondering whether this was going to be like a 90-minute special. I really think... Actually, it's tricky, because apart from some elements which I'm going to get into, for the most part, I think the plot works pretty well.
No, so do I, yeah.
But I was just kind of wanting a bit more. I kind of wanted a bit more of the Toymaker, as enjoyable as that was. And just the pacing, I mean, it worked well for what it was, but I think I would just want a little bit of extra breathing room to really sort of tease out all these insane concepts and to really sort of milk all these sort of dramatic nuances for all that they are worth. I will say, however, before getting into this, I did very much enjoy this story, and
me too,
I think at the very least, the fact that RTD was able to put in such a jam-packed plot with all the wild concepts that are there, and have it all turn out as cohesively and well-written and nuanced as it did, is incredibly impressive.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I think. I couldn't... Like, there are just moments where, again, like, the plot is working at a breakneck speed. I don't think that's particularly controversial to say. But even then, there are just small little moments where it either slows down just enough for it to really for us to sort of stew in the moment, or even when it's quite fast, there's quite a lot of detail and nuance, and it's, again, at the very least, very, very admirable that he was able to pull that off at all. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Good for him.
Yeah, no, I'm in general agreement. I think that overall this story is strong.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that, look, there is an obvious asterisk that could be applied to the way the episode wraps up. In general, you liked it or you didn't. We'll figure out where we stand on the regeneration itself towards the end of the episode. I'm kind of torn on it personally. Like, there's good parts about it, there's bad parts about it, there are parts about it that are just generally unknown at the moment.
Yeah, Sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, it's difficult to say overall how I feel about the regeneration or bi-generation at the moment, because the implications of it we haven't really gotten into yet. And I'm positive this isn't something that Russell just did on a whim without thinking about how it's going to impact the rest of the show down the line, because there's so many elements of all three of these episodes that are setting up for future things.
Yeah,
and I refuse to believe this isn't doing the same thing. So
for sure.
You know, in some ways I'm sort of wanting to be a bit more lenient on it because of that, but however, we still do have to take the bi-generation at face value based on this episode alone. And
looking at the text itself.
Yeah, and I would be lying if I said there were aspects of it that removed sort of elements of regeneration that have been there for like 60 years now. Like, there are things that this takes away, but there are also things that it adds. So, you know, it's, like I said, I don't know how I stand on it at the moment, but I have a feeling we should save that discussion largely for the end of the episode.
Yeah, I'll just give it like a bit of a preliminary thoughts on it. So I have watched this episode multiple times. I've watched it 3 times in as many days. As I normally do. Real glad I did because yeah, it was regardless of what you thought of the bi-generation thing, it was pretty shocking.
Yeah.
And surprising. So being able to sort of just absorb that shock and watch it again and think, oh, actually, um, well, no, it's not even that I didn't think it. It's not even that I thought that it didn't work. It's just again, just sort of getting used to,
Yeah.
this wild new idea. Um, Generally speaking, I thought it was pretty good. We'll obviously tease out, our exact thoughts on it and all the implications. Some elements of it I felt were a little bit unclear. That may be deliberate. Again, we'll get into it, but I certainly wasn't really bothered by it, especially
No.
given that RTD had sort of teased in an interview that this is going to I don't know, I can't remember exactly what he says, but like it was going to recontextualize everything and make us rethink the whole show. And I'm going to be honest, Cuff, I was a little bit nervous about that. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm just sort of recovering from the timeless child.
No,
Maybe I'm.
yeah, it certainly has that kind of flavor. When you hear a Doctor Who showrunner say, this is going to
Yeah.
recontextualize everything, you do sort of have the master in the back of your mind going, everything you think you know is a
Oh,
lie, and we've been there before.
yeah. And so that I was a little bit nervous about that, but given that, I actually don't think it's as canon breaking as even
No,
RTD was teasing. I was
no, I don't
surprised.
think so either.
It. I mean, like it's hard to separate it from the timeless child
Sure.
story. Um, I mean, I think RTD has made a concerted effort to sort of link everything in the canon up in that way, but
Yeah.
again, given what I was sort of anticipating, it certainly, the very least that I can say is it certainly didn't bother me anywhere near as much as I thought. These big revelations were going to.
Yeah, and
Um,
as far as I can tell, the only like wider implications that it has for the history of the show only affect like the Doctor Who multiverse, and they don't like
right.
because I think we'll get into it later on, but
Yeah, yeah, sure.
it
Well,
certainly isn't a now we can't like now there are elements of the show from the past that like don't make sense anymore, like Timeless Child does. There's nothing like that.
yeah. No, 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 no. This is much more considered, um, than Timeless Child ever was. So, mm,
Jumping over to the timescales, out of
sure.
76 votes, this story has an average rating of 7.5. I'd probably be inclined to put that slightly higher personally, just because like
Same, actually.
the elements about it that are really strong are really
Yeah.
strong.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it seems like the more you can't get your head around by generation, the lower you were putting this on the ranking. And that's honestly fair enough if this is like a concept that you believe like is a betrayal of the very idea of regeneration. I understand how you might have that opinion. I don't personally, and
Yeah, neither do I.
I think that it's the kind of thing where it's like, okay, get over the initial shock and actually ask yourself, do you hate this for any reason other than it's new?
Yeah, exactly.
And
I think. Sorry, yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
sure that there are genuine reasons to dislike by generation, and people may
Mm,
fill us in
mm.
on those later on down the line. But at the moment, we can't think of any, or at the very least, or I can't think of any, or at least any that aren't countered by some positives of this concept.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. There's
so
nothing
yeah,
that I can think of that it it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't really, break the canon that much. I
no,
mean, I know me as more of a classic fan and you more of as a revival fan, our perspectives on it may differ in the precise ways. But yeah, it doesn't. It's only like after getting over the shock, certainly doesn't ruin the show for me. So
no, no.
yeah,
Um, there's a 7.2 for plot. Now I kind of see why
yeah,
it's landed there. It is very easy, especially in the back half, to forget about the whole everyone on Earth is a Karen now premise that the episode initially runs with. That is kind of dropped as soon as the toy maker appears. Like
I mean,
it's the impetus for getting the toy maker involved, but there's never any like, oh, and now we're like 15 minutes to the end, and it's getting worse, and everyone's like even worse than they were before. Like it's very much a kind of thing where it's like, this is what the toy maker's doing, and now let's bring the toy maker in and forget about that whole thing. So
I mean, I suppose so. I wasn't bothered by that element that
me
much.
neither.
I mean, it would have been fun to sort of, again, to maybe give it a 90-minute runtime, just expand it, maybe go into the human world a bit more and just see, what's going on. But it didn't bother me. Certainly for what the story was, that part didn't really harm the plot
No, no.
that much. But there are other smaller elements, and we'll get to those. But yeah, I think the plot, I want to say it's a bit higher than that, but as you say, I understand why people would rank it that.
8.9 for acting, absolutely. Just incredible acting all around in this. Neil Patrick Harris's Toymaker he eats up every scene he's in. He's clearly having a ball with it, and like I think he's like the perfect Toymaker for the story they wanted to tell here. Like you can tell that he's channeling Michael Goff in certain parts. You can tell he's channeling aspects of his own performance style in some parts. In general, they blend together well. The returning characters are just as well acted as they have been. It's a good introduction for Ncuti Gatwa. I think all round the acting is really solid in this.
I will say I do have some slight issues with MPH's performance simply
Here we go.
because, especially when, I mean, and I get that like the German accent that he's doing, it's deliberately fake. Like you can tell
Yes.
he's just having fun with it, and that's fine. But it is very difficult for me to separate that performance from Barney Stinson. It is quite
Really?
difficult. Now, here's the thing. I will say that's not too bad because the Toymaker, certainly as NPH is interpreting him, is very much like a trickster god kind of thing. So it makes sense that there are similarities, and it doesn't hurt the performance too much overall. But it is very difficult, and I'll give you actually a tiny little detail in this, and this doesn't actually have to do with performance; it's more with sound editing. I think it happens at least once, maybe even a couple of times. There's that one bit where the toy maker winks and you can hear like a ding sound, and I swear to God, Cuff, that that's been used in How I Met Your Mother.
It
I'm
has.
sure. There's like I got flashbacks when I saw that. I'm like, okay, we're doing this.
It's
So
interesting. It's interesting that you say that because I didn't get any Barney Stinson from this performance, but there were like one or two occasions where the toy maker says orphan, and it brought me right back to Count Olaf. So I guess we're just like, which he's that's why I say he's sort of like harkening back to like different roles he's played in the past, but they're only like little moments. And I think I don't know, like I said, I didn't really ever get any Barney from this. Like,
I just find it very difficult. I think
I think it may just be because that's like a character that he can play really well. So like
perhaps.
he's been playing. I think he's had characters like that before Barney and since Barney. Um, it might just be because like he played that character for 9 years, so it's very difficult to separate
Well,
from.
the thing is, maybe, but like I've seen him in other stuff. I've seen him in American Horror Story, and I've seen him in Gone Girl. Those were quite different performances, but this one, I'm just thinking Barney. I'm just thinking Barney doing, one of his plays. It doesn't, again, it doesn't ruin it. And I think, for example, because I've gone into detail before that I didn't like MPH's performance as Olaf, but this works better because that sort of trickster Barney persona. Because let's be honest, Barney is a trickster type.
Sure.
That maps onto sort of the toy maker,
Yeah.
sort of generally, and especially the way MPH is interpreting him. But it's just very difficult for me to separate that performance from the Barney Stinson persona. Having said that,
Mm.
it's still generally a very entertaining performance. And I do wonder, here's an interesting theory, if I'd never watched How I Met Your Mother, for example,
Mm.
would I be feeling the same way? Because it's
Probably
possible
not.
I might not be. Because if I hadn't seen it and just saw, how should I put this? Like, okay, so he's acting. He's really, as you said, he's having a ball. He is seriously enjoying himself. He's just
Yeah.
going nuts, which is really great to see. So if, theoretically, if I'd never watched How I Met Your Mother and I watched this performance first, and I then watched How I Met Your Mother, I would be saying, oh, that's just the toy maker. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Like
think that
it's,
might be where it's coming from. Yeah.
yeah, like there is certainly a strong reviewer to his performance, and I will say, given that I am reminded a lot of Barney Stinson, he still hits all the right dramatic and comedic notes.
Hmm.
He's still, as uncomfortably funny as he needs to be. When he gets a little bit more serious, it does get unsettling, and you could also maybe attribute this to the direction and the editing and certainly the writing. But again, given when I see this, I think, okay, Barney Stinson, it's still really admirable and really, excuse me, quite entertaining how weird and frightening and uncomfortable he is as this
Yeah,
character.
definitely.
So yeah, I feel again it's difficult for me to separate it, but it's still like a very good character actor performance, nonetheless. But I do notice that for me, and maybe it's got something to do with, like, again, it's similar to Barney Stinson's voice in particular,
Hmm.
or one of his plays that he would do. But some of the best scenes I feel are the scenes where the toy maker, like when he's just doing pantomime, like when he's not talking, like when he's dancing about in the street, or when he's dancing to the Spice Girls. I mean, it's those may be the strongest parts of the performance for me, but generally speaking, it is still a strong performance.
That's incredibly fascinating to hear because for
Mm.
me, those are the moments that are that feel like they were the most written because it's Neil Patrick Harris. Like I would have put good money on that spice up your life scene being the
Oh
bit that
yeah,
he felt the most Barney to you.
yeah. To be, yeah. No, that's a good point. Um, yeah. I mean, I guess that makes sense. I don't
And
know.
it's interesting as well because I am currently actually in the middle of rewatching the series of Unfortunate Events
Mm,
Netflix series, and even with I've been trying to like what as I'm watching it trying to go through and be like, okay, can I see where Fitz is coming from? And I'm like 3 episodes to the end, and honestly, I just can't. Like, I just think it's incredible. So I do think there is kind of a mental hurdle of your own making that you've accidentally set up on both counts here. Now, that's not to discount. Like, I can't say for certain there may be legitimate things that are bugging you that aren't related to How I Met Your Mother and Neil Patrick Harris in
mm,
general, and are just related to the way it's written or the way it's directed. I can't say for certain, but like just from my
mm.
vantage point, I do think it's more of a you thing than a. With the greatest respect.
I mean, I can't. I mean, I haven't thought about the topic enough to truly unpack it, but I can't entirely deny that. But anyway,
Like I don't want to
uh,
sound disrespectful. Like the main thing that we always say here is like everyone's entitled to their own opinion and no
yeah,
one's
yeah,
like
yeah.
wrong about anything. But like even rewatching it now, I'm like I just don't get
Mm,
it.
mm. That's fine. Yeah. So as I say, generally hard for me to separate it, but
Sure.
for what it is still very, very entertaining.
Hmm.
And it can, like, it stands alone enough as a performance for me to, like, separate it enough from How I Met Your Mother to work.
Sure.
It's just, again, I was just sort of thinking, oh, ding, that's another flashback I'm having. Ding, that's another one. Anyway, so yeah, I don't like. I think I said earlier that it's like a problem. I don't know. Maybe it's not really a problem. It's just more an observation on
Sure.
my
Yeah.
end, and it's very important to point out that, as I say, that, how should I put this? The fact that he performs the toy maker like that, like, what other way would you expect NPH to perform him? That's is a
Yeah.
way of putting it, because it does
100%.
really suit the tone of
Hmm.
not just this episode but Doctor Who generally, because Doctor Who has always had a bit of a kind of a sort of a silly, campy nature to it. So having MPH be sort of kind of weird and over the top and you know, funny in the way that he is, I think it works. And it's interesting that there are in a way some similarities to maybe a little bit with John Sims' master performance. I'm mainly because I'm comparing, Here Come the Drums to Spice Up Your Life, but
I definitely
it's
picked up on that as well.
but
Yeah.
it's different enough to make it really work. Like you really get the feeling that this is something different. This is a unique character with his own gender and his own rules and his own sort of attitude, which is really great. So yeah, perhaps saying it's a problem, maybe that's a bit much. It's just more observation, something that stuck out to me. But generally speaking, still a very entertaining performance and fits perfectly, I think, with what RTD is trying to do here. Everybody else, they're firing off on all cylinders. I can't think of.
And there's no bad performances.
No, I can't think of a single one. And I love Shruti Gatwa's performance.
Yeah, and it's like we only get like a little taste of him, but like already I'm like, oh, this is such a fresh take on the Doctor, and I'm so looking forward to seeing how this character is fleshed out even further in the future.
I loved it because and I think I even said this when we were discussing all the announcements that were happening, because I've watched Sex Education, for example, and I said at the time that that Shruti Gatwa had great potential for a good Doctor performance, based on his performance in Sex Education, because he kind of has this sort of like he can embody both a sort of a joie de vivre, sort of whimsy, sort of a element, but also can portray a deep moral seriousness, and we got to see that I think in perfect form here.
Yeah, definitely.
Because he has got the whimsy part of him, which is really wonderful. But then there's that great bit where he's like, and Sarah Jane is gone now. Can you believe that for a second? And it just, man, that's real. That's
well,
real.
yeah. I mean, it's also just rectifying like a 12-year wrong, where it's like this is the first time in universe that Sarah Jane's death has been acknowledged.
Yeah, which is
It's
awesome.
been that long since she died.
Yeah, which is wild.
The Brigadiers had like 4 or 5 different shout outs since Nicholas Courtney's death. Which fair enough, important character, but like
But Sarah Jane, I mean,
Elizabeth
come on.
Sladen also deserved it.
Yeah, for sure. But even just like in terms of the performance, like you felt the dramatic energy in a scene like that.
Yeah,
and
that scene in particular where
yeah.
14 and 15 are just like discussing all that they've been through. One of the highlights of the episode, and for me, that scene alone justified by generation, because you don't get that otherwise.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I think for me the core of Ncuti Gatwa's performance, again, we don't even get heaps of it because he only shows up in the last 10-15 minutes, but the core of it is this real sense of earnestness and sincerity. You really get, because like one of the problems I have with Matt Smith's performance, for example, as I'm sure I've mentioned on the podcast before, that he tries to be eccentric and tries to have the whimsy, but it doesn't feel authentic to me. And that also impacts when he tries to be dramatic. I mean, that's a whole other thing, which I'm sure I'll get to at some point. But yeah, there was just an inauthenticity there, but with Ncuti, it feels real. It feels completely authentic, and it feels like not only is he giving a good interpretation of this character, but it feels unique. It feels, I mean, I don't know the man personally, obviously, but like,
No.
you feel like he's putting himself into this performance, but in the best way possible, and it's great.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm quite excited to see what.
Yeah,
What he does with the role.
we don't have long to wait either. We only have like, as of recording this, like 2 weeks to wait to the Christmas special.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
8.7 for effects.
Honestly, like, yeah, I mean, I can't.
They're mostly good. They're mostly good.
I can't think of, like, most of them are practical, I think, which
Yeah,
works to
and
benefit.
I'm really glad that the show started to do that again. Like, I don't think there was ever like I can't. Well, I'll put it this way: I don't think the show has ever like gone down such a heavy CGI route that it became like incredibly noticeable in the past.
Mm.
But like, there's definitely been a ramp up of the physical effects as opposed to the special, and
Yeah.
I think it's for the better.
Yeah, I agree. I just like even the set design is really great. The Toymaker's Labyrinth is fantastic. The puppets and the terrifying dolls, and we'll get into all of that later on.
Oh Christ, yeah,
Generally, yeah, I think the effects are pretty good. Like even when the Toymaker's dimension sort of collapsing in on itself was pretty convincing. I felt maybe
yeah.
not full blown Hollywood special effects, but still
No, it was
pretty
the
good.
kind of
And
thing. It was the kind of thing where it was like the design of it was cool, so it didn't matter that it didn't quite like look realistic.
yeah,
Which in general is the way I tend to lean with these sort of things. Like I don't mind if the effects don't look realistic, just as long as they look unique and cool. I'm generally okay with it. Like
mm. Yeah. I mean, I think obviously there are certain levels of uh I don't know, again, I guess audience tolerance when it comes to the
yeah, yeah,
fakery of certain special effects, and Doctor Who, has sometimes crossed that line a little bit too much.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it still works for what it is. I mean, I think you can fairly clearly tell in this story that they're taking advantage of a Disney budget. But it is still good to see that they're using most of that Disney budget for practical effects. So I
Yeah,
think,
certainly.
and certainly they're not overusing CGI to an obnoxious degree, which is really good.
Hmm.
Hmm.
7.6 for replay.
Um, Maybe a little higher for me because again,
Sure.
it was mainly just getting over the shock of the bi-generation, but it did get a bit better for me. The more I watched it, so yeah.
Yeah, and also 68 out of 70 people say this requires a previous story. Don't come into this blind.
Yeah, no. Oh, there's like explicit references to uh whole previous series and story arcs. So I mean, like they do a decent job of recapping some of the events of the Moffat and even the Chibnall era, but like in order to get the full dramatic weight, you really need to have seen a decent amount of those seasons. I mean, my viewing of the Moffat era has been spotty. I still got the bulk of the emotional impact and the toy makers doing all the weird little puppeteering stuff. But even I recognize, yeah, I'm sure I'd probably care about this more if I watched, all of the Moffat era. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so let's jump into it.
Hmm.
I do find it amusing that like even now the social commentary continues with Russell T Davies, and like I alluded to it earlier, like the planet of the Karens,
Mm,
and it really is that. I mean, I don't think it's
mm.
ever like so completely in your face about it. Like the Doctor obviously gives that speech in unit about like don't think this lets you off the hook. You know, the giggle isn't to blame for what's wrong with humanity.
Yeah. Well, it is very interesting because this was one of the things that sort of stuck out to me because okay, you could argue that the commentary overall isn't super subtle, but I that element doesn't bother me that
No.
much because if you're gonna accuse Doctor Who of doing that, then you may as well accuse the Blair Bush metaphors in Aliens of London World War Three of that. You may as well accuse the Thatcher metaphors in the Happiness Patrol of that.
Yep. And you also can accuse the Peter Capaldi's defining speech. Same thing.
I mean, wait, are we talking about the Zygon speech? What speech are we
Yep,
talking about?
Zygon speech, the anti-war
Um,
Zygon speech.
no, I felt that was sort of existential enough to not be super obvious.
I mean,
That's a
true,
whole
but
other thing. Well,
it is at the end of the day still very obviously an anti-war speech,
it
which
is, but there's I don't know. Anyway, like that's a whole other thing. We'll
yeah,
get to that episode when we get to it. But generally speaking, yeah, the commentary is a little bit on the nose, but like it's still for the most part works.
Well, yeah, sure, and it's also like every single anti-capitalism Doctor Who episode is a very similar thing as well,
Yeah. Like it's again,
except with Glenn.
it Doctor Who in its commentary, I think historically has never been like the most super subtle show, but it's not really meant to be. It's stylized. It's meant to be,
It's
kind
also
of
for
meant to be like
kids.
this. So yeah, so I'm not that doesn't bother me terribly. There are
No,
some
no, no.
moments that it does cross the line for me in terms of obviousness. Curiously, the scene where the Doctor gives that speech where he's talking about, that you can't escape this. The human race has a sort of a corruptible nature, and that's what the toy maker's feeding off. That was actually one of the better parts for me because again, like it sort of kept it more of at an existential level. It wasn't literally oh, here's that thing that's literally like this thing. Oh, bad. It wasn't like when the that news presenter says I'm anti Zdex, and I'm like, gee, I wonder what that's a metaphor for,
No,
guys.
no, I like that because it brings Trinity Wells back into the show.
It was pretty great seeing it, I must
It was
admit.
so good. Like that for me was almost the biggest surprise at the episode. Just
A little
the,
bit, yeah.
the sudden reoccurrence of at one time was the revival's most recurring background character.
Yeah, no, that was cool. I did enjoy it, but the line itself for me, yeah, was a little bit on the nose because
Well,
you can
yeah,
kind of tell that what the
it's
giggle sort of
incredibly clear what that
yeah,
specific moment
it
was targeting
oh
to.
for sure like and the giggle itself is meant to be a metaphor for things like anti-vaxxers, obviously sovereign citizens, nonsense like that.
Hmm.
And again, for the most part, it works. There's just these little moments where it just kind of well, actually, no. To know in terms of like the commentary for what the giggle is, that moment with the I'm anti Zdex, that is really the only moment it really sort of pushes the limit for me.
Yeah.
There are some lines from the toy maker which I felt were a little bit on the nose for my
Oh, you're talking
liking.
about when he says they type and they
They
cancel.
type and they cancel. Or later on, it's like, and the children they stay at home, staring at screens and playing with joysticks, and then and oh, the mind games, the dating and the ghosting. I'm like, oh, come on, RTD, what
For
are you
me,
doing,
for me,
man?
that was just more about the whole game side of things. I
I
don't think
mean,
that
well,
was specifically a
yeah,
parody thing.
the thing is, it.
Because
I'm
when
also
the toy maker talks about the kids on their joysticks, I don't think he's saying that as like a oh, and that's another thing wrong with humanity. I think he's saying no, that's just another game that the toy maker's latched onto as a
I
reason why he likes
suppose
it. You know?
so. I mean. Maybe I just feel like, and I guess it helps that it's the villain who's saying these things, so
Yeah.
that may be a bit more helpful. But I just feel like if you're going to comment on all of these sort of all of the issues, then I just feel like there's a more nuanced way you can do it rather than putting in even just phrases like ghosting. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we'll back on this episode in 5 years and find that that element's aged really well. But
Probably.
it just strikes me as sort of a super memey, hip with the kids sort of moment, and
Well, I think for me, the most shocking aspect of this storyline was seeing Kate Stewart, a typically cool-headed and altruistic person, all of a sudden give in to base urges and just become like a monster.
yeah, that was actually pretty good because again, like some of the commentary was like, oh, it's an invasion of my privacy and all that.
Mm.
That is a little bit on the nose, but it does really work. And in the end, the scene's kind of funny, but it's also really uncomfortable, and it
Well, because
works
to
really well
me,
in that.
to me, that's the scene that is like that's the scene that is the most okay. No, Russell isn't just decrying this one group of people. He's saying that anyone can be capable of this kind of behavior.
Yeah, which is true.
Yeah,
And that element of it, that doesn't for me. That's not the issue. I
no,
think I'm
no.
more criticizing these are smaller details. I mean,
Oh
like
no,
in an
sure. Yeah, I'm
otherwise,
not like yeah. I'm
yeah, in an otherwise pretty strong piece of political commentary.
mm, mm.
There are just these little moments that I
Yeah, I
just
get
sort
that.
of bristle at a little bit. But like even when the toy maker is making that speech when he's on the gun turret and he says, the games and whatnot. But the bit where he says, the gambling and the anger, like that works well enough for me because that's sort of again broad enough to not be, oh, look at this trendy thing, guys. I'm commenting on this. So yeah, it's just again, it's an otherwise pretty good piece of political commentary. It's just these small moments where I don't know whether it's a personal thing, but I just think, oh, okay,
Mm,
you know.
yeah, I think I think you're. I almost get it. I think that
Mm.
if I think there are ways that could have been way more. Um, I think in general it is going to stand the test of time. I think if the toy maker had
Hmm.
said something like, "And the children they sit at home playing Fortnite," like that would have been a whole different kettle of fish.
Yeah, but instead he basically makes a vague, I assume it's a Tetris reference.
He
Um,
references Tetris directly, and
yeah,
then after that he sort of goes on to this tirade about other stuff. So
yeah. Yeah, maybe. At the very least, even if it, regardless of how on the nose any element of it is, at
mhm.
least there's an intelligent point at the core of it. So as a point of comparison, this is not, you know, the dumb Donald Trump stand-in that doesn't really, you know,
No, no, it's
help
not.
with
There's
anything
no.
in the Chibnall era. There's no
Yeah,
here's the real fire and the fury.
yeah, no. Jack Robertson doesn't show up at any point. It's
No,
not like that.
no, it's not like that at all. No, the
Yeah,
core
and
of
well, even when we see that that British politician, that's not a direct parallel to anyone in particular. That's
no,
just
no,
a
no, no.
general
That's
climate of
no
politics.
that part was fine for me. Like it, again, maybe a little bit on the nose, but that makes sense because that's what most politicians are like.
Yeah, of course.
Um, so again, as the doctor kind of points out, these are things we know about in sort of human nature and modern
Hmm.
society. The toy makers just sort of amplifying them. So that stuff works out fine for me. I think again,
Yeah,
it's just these small little moments where I just think.
almost.
Yeah, like I see what you're doing. Don't know if I can totally vibe with it, but
Mhm.
anyway, as I say, generally speaking, pretty good political commentary.
Yeah.
And the political commentary we've gotten, in the previous last few years. At least we're
Oh
not,
no, 100%. It's not like at any point the doctor's like the doctor gives our speech. It's not like he then repeats it over and over again, spelling it out in even clearer detail for the audience every single time. He says it
yeah,
once and then leaves it up to the audience to be like, okay, I understand what this is now,
yeah.
and then
And the
move
core
on.
And the core of it is, of course, I think quite ethically sound. The doctor's not turning around. I know we've harped on about this quite a bit, but
Yeah.
the doctor's not turning around saying, "No, no, 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 don't worry, guys. Yeah, the company treated all you workers like shit, but HR has promised me that things are going to get better now." You know.
Uh,
Uh,
anyway,
anyway, yeah, that's a whole thing.
yeah, I generally like the A to B to C of that whole section when we get
Yeah,
this like big like internet communications thing has gone online, and for the first time the whole world is connected via screens, and
yeah.
that is what allowed this like lingering image of the toy maker's marionette to sort of infect everyone with this this musical sequence of laughs.
Mm.
I think that generally works really well.
Yeah, for sure. Um, the pacing of that scene, it is like of that whole section. Really, it is quite quick, but it works to the episode's benefit because it is a very tense situation. They kind of,
Yeah.
well, no, you literally kind of hit the ground running
Mm.
from even the end of the previous episode, so it all works. We want to know, yeah, what the hell's going on here? The world's
Oh yeah,
going crazy.
certainly. I
What's
think
happening?
yeah, I think that certainly helps getting that like minute of
Yeah,
chaos at the end of the previous episode.
and it all the whole thing helps to sort of really uh make the stakes very clear. Like the fact that we go from oh haha hello. Oh no, it's more like, oh no, tension, everyone's going crazy, to hello old friends who I really care about, to oh something terrifying happening, to oh Kate, what are you doing? That doesn't seem nice or normal for what you normally do. Oh, it's the giggle. Well, that's unfortunate. So
Mhm.
it the pacing is quite quick, but it really just sort of I think, add to the episode. And there's even a fair bit of exposition in those scenes, but again, because the pacing is so quick and because we want these answers,
Mm.
the exposition actually works really, really
Well,
well.
it's also nice that like we say it's quick, but that sequence does find enough time to slow down and like catch us up on Mel,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you know, like give us a bit of tension around. It's just a very simple musical sequence, but why are we reacting this way?
yeah.
You know, it does slow down like occasionally, and I think that's why it works in general because it isn't just
Mm,
full blast the whole time. We do like sort of get to
yeah.
sit with the characters for a bit,
Yeah,
and it's
that's
something
true.
that like because look, I'll throw my hands up. I don't know Mel. Never met the character
Mm,
before. This was my second exposure to her. The first being the Companions Anonymous meeting at the end of the Power of the Doctor.
mm.
Um, and it's good to know that it's good to know retroactively now that Power of the Doctor fucked up by not explaining how Mel got back to Earth and left that up to a future episode to
uh,
explain.
oh
With that
dear.
episode having no knowledge that they would want to bring Mel back in the first place.
Yeah. Goodness me. Yeah, no, and you're right, that scene where she's talking to the Doctor about Sabalong Glitz, who is a character from the classic series. He
I
appears
had a
in
feeling, yeah.
Yeah, he appears in two stories during the Trial of a Time Lord saga, and then he appears again in Dragonfire, which is the episode where Mel departs and Ace joins, the show.
Right.
So, that was a fun little reference, and I will have to say it's not just with this reference; it's with a bunch of others as well. Um, I think, especially for an anniversary show, having references, it can be very easy to just use them pointlessly and to just throw them out saying, "Oh, see, guys,
Mhm.
remember this," and make them saying, "I know what that is. I saw it.
Yeah,
I, I
yeah.
I heard it and I clapped."
Yeah,
It's very
exactly.
easy to cheapen those moments, and I think we saw that with the Five Doctors,
Yes.
which was really annoying. Here, although I think basically all the references and sort of treading on ground, they're used really well. They fit pretty perfectly in the context of the plot. They feel necessary, and they just feel very emotionally satisfying and not cheap. And
Oh, I
um
agree, yeah.
and I think that again, something else to admire about this episode, that RTD didn't go for, the cheap laugh or the cheap sentimental moment. It all just, fits in.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Like there's a
Like,
there's a Marvick Chen reference in the end,
yeah.
and he's one character from the now mostly almost entirely lost. No, actually no, entirely lost story. Of the Daleks' master plan. I think it's entirely lost. Anyway, so that was funny, but again, it works in the context of the scene.
Yeah,
Which I think
And, like,
is pretty
it's
cool.
yeah, and we know from previous episodes that Units is willing to hire old companions to do some freelance work for them, so
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
for
like
sure.
Mel just shows up for no reason, and
Mm.
I think it is confirmed that she's going to be in Series 14 in some capacity as well, unless people were wrong
Mm.
about that, and this is the extent of her appearance. Um, so if we see more of her, great. If not, well, it was good to see her here. I'm looking forward to meeting her.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think that'll
Yeah.
be pretty cool.
Um, is it? Do we need to touch on the Vleeks or whatever that robot thing was that works at Unit? I don't think we do. It's just one of those
No,
like incidental background elements that we're like, okay, they've got an alien robot working for them. Cool.
look,
Moving on.
look. I actually, again, this goes back to how much I admire the script. The fact that that's just a thing that happens and that it works as well as it does is great.
Mm,
Because it's taking advantage of the show generally and the context of being at Unit. It's like, it's almost like, Men in Black. It's like if there's going to be a random, alien creature showing up, it's going to be in Unit. So that makes perfect sense, and it's a really good way to just sort of, um, get the plot moving. And the fact that it can do that so quickly, but without it feeling sort of slapdash or, I don't know, like forced, I suppose, is really
yeah,
great.
and it shows how restrained RTD was in penning this episode. Like he didn't want to go overboard with references to the show's past. Like that could have very easily been an Ood working the controls or whatever, but he chose to just create an entirely new robot species thing
Yeah,
for a 1 minute at most screen time.
Yeah, I think it. And in that sense, I think it works. As you say, like if it had been an Ood, that would have been a bit too distracting.
Yeah.
Um, Same with most other, I think, form of aliens and creatures that they've met. So yeah, I thought the use of the Vlinks was pretty impressive.
And then we get to the entire sequence in and within the toy maker's shop in Soho. Um, this is where the episode is at its most unsettling. Of course, there's like a number of reasons why that is.
Yeah,
There's the toy maker's multiple monologues, all of the creepy marionette stuff, the tension regarding this infinite labyrinth.
yeah.
Yeah, it's all
Um,
done really well. It obviously it doesn't match the EBGB factor of the previous episode, but I don't really think it's trying to, and it's trying it in a different way as well. So
Actually, you know what? Honestly, I love the whole sequence, but there were moments in that sequence that were scarier to me than Wild Blue Yonder.
well, no,
I
I get that, but like that's it's more of like a is there more of like a directly threatening capacity
Oh
to
yeah,
all
as
of this
opposed to
stuff?
more the yeah,
Yeah,
I think I see
because
what
with
you mean.
Wild Blue Yonder, the main element of unease from that comes from not knowing like what's real and who
Yeah,
you can trust. Whereas with
yeah,
this, it's
yeah.
more of like a general creep factor, and then of course you throw in some scary puppets, which is basically cheating.
Um, I suppose. I think yeah, I really enjoyed this sequence. I'm not sure if I'd say it's objectively the strongest part of the whole episode, but it
Oh no,
is really still really good. Whether it be the recap of the previous series with the toy maker and his puppet show, which was again it was as uncomfortable as that scene needed to be. I think. Um, and again, sort of kudos to MPH's performance. The weird way he switches between the super fake German accent to the angry American accent. There's something about that
yeah.
again makes me
Well,
feel
that's
really
all
uncomfortable.
right then.
Yeah, it makes me feel really uncomfortable, which is great. And you can see just the devastation on the doctor's faces because, like, you get the feeling that he's kind of rationalizing some of this, that he obviously feels a lot of guilt about, what's happened to his past companions, but just those unspoken emotions, I think they
Yeah.
really give a sense of tension to that scene, which is really, really wonderful.
Well, I also
Um,
just love like the and I don't think he even intended to do it, but the subtle shade that he throws at both of the previous showrunners, like with all three of Stephen Moffat's main companions dying, but not really. And then like all of Chris Chibnall's companions basically just like they just could decide to leave, and then that's the end of their journey, and they didn't really it doesn't really impact them at all.
yeah, I didn't pick up on that myself, but that I mean, and again, as you say, there's no. I don't know if there's any way to objectively prove that, but
No,
it
no.
make
I mean, and it's pretty clear from back from like behind the scenes and like interview footage. There is absolutely no bad blood between any
no.
of them. They're all very good friends.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So it definitely isn't that, but I just found it funny.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, of course, there have been like so many memes going around about like if the toy maker had continued the monologue onto the next companions, and the classic one is like and then there was poor Ryan Sinclair, and he couldn't ride a bike. He has
Yeah.
dyspraxia. Well, that's all right then.
Oh God, that is quite funny. It must be said. Um.
Well, I think even the more impressive thing about that sequence, and again, this is watching
mm,
like a bit of behind the scenes stuff, is like they had a really small turnaround to film all of that stuff, and because
mm,
NPH has like a history with um, magic and puppeteering and stuff, like they had someone off to the side who could do the like who would do the puppeteering in place of him, but he largely did it all himself. And it
nice.
took him like 10 minutes to figure out. Okay, so you stand here, you give me this thing on from this angle, then I'll do the thing, and then hand me the scissors like that, and like apparently it was like really quick turnaround for those shoots, so
Mm.
it's really
Yeah, that is
impressive
very
filming that.
impressive. For sure. Um, I want to talk about the horror elements in this story.
Yeah, of course.
Um, Specifically creepy marionette turning into the Doctor, and
Hmm.
especially
Uh,
the dolls. Jesus Christ.
yeah.
I was again impressed and honestly, Cuff, that scene, especially with the dolls, kind of fucked me up. Like that.
Yeah, it's
Oh God, that was so creepy. I can't. I don't know what it was tapping into, but it felt like I was. I don't know. It's like
well, it's
tapping
a
into like
similar.
childhood fears. It was
Yeah, well,
so.
isn't it a similar kind of thing with like a fear of clowns that a lot of people have like
Yeah.
a slight fear of those like creepy looking marionette toys?
Every bit in that little scene with Donna and the dolls, every
Yes,
part of that was so
fucking
well
creepy.
executed. The
Yeah.
performances were fantastic. The direction was creepy. The editing was jarring and sudden. Excuse me. And then like the little bits we see you know the babbies sort of coming in the
Oh,
background, and then the rapid cut to one of them saying "Mama," like it just. Oh God, that really, really, really unsettled me, Cuff. I'm not gonna lie.
yeah.
That was one of the I think yeah, like easily one of the I think the scariest things we've seen in Doctor Who in years. So
Wow. Well,
oh
it definitely harkens back to something Moffat you like love to do a lot, especially in the RTD era, which is to take something that is like a genuinely like primal fear that a lot of us have even at a base level, and
yeah.
then just ramp the fuck out of it.
Yeah. It
Like
was
yeah, children, statues, the dark, and now puppets.
yeah, oh God. And I love that scene. Like as I mean maybe I'm coming at this as a horror movie fan, but like just the way that whole scene was executed was so frightening for me.
Yeah,
And
no,
it
I get that.
also, really harkened back to the use of horror in Doctor Who in previous years, as you say, with
Mm.
Moffat stuff. But also even going back to the Seventh Doctor, I'm having, Curse of Fenric and Ghostlight flashbacks, which is kind of great.
Don't
Um,
it? No, not Ghostlight.
well,
Like bits of it, sure, but like I don't think I mean having seen the episode
yeah,
once, I
yeah,
don't
no.
think there was anything in Ghostlight that was like objectively this scary.
Yeah. I mean, I know maybe it's more the sort of vague gothic trappings of
Sure, okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you
yeah.
that.
But certainly, no, Curse of Fenric is certainly pretty terrifying. But the
Okay.
point is, Doctor Who has always had, I think, a sort of a horror streak,
Yes.
um, running through it. Um, and what I love about those moments in this episode, it is a classic, dive behind the sofa
Yeah.
moment,
Oh, very much so. Yes.
and it's just great to see that this is again so admirable that RTD is putting this stuff in here. This really shows that this is a showrunner who really understands this show and who really, really cares about it.
Well, yeah, it's
Um,
amazing. Like in just 3 episodes, like they've pretty much hit every beat of what a traditional Doctor Who season would contain. We've had
yeah,
alien invasion, robots, long corridors, chase sequences, unease,
yeah,
tension, units, scares, regeneration.
hmm
Like
and
basically the most
subverted
speed
those
run.
things pretty well
Yeah,
too.
yeah, as well. Um, then we get to well, there's of course the second game that they play,
Mm,
which is a very simple game of cut the cards.
mm.
Um, I think it's a small scene, but it is genuinely quite nerve wracking
Oh, I
for
loved it.
some
That was
reason.
great.
Like they picked the exact right number for the doctor to pull, where it's an 8, and it's like, oh, that could go either way.
Mm. Yeah,
Um, but it
for
was also
sure.
really clever to have the doctor lose that game and then invoke the best of 3 rule,
Yeah,
because I think that also just amps things up even more for the finale, while also making the history with the character way more important.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Because this
Um,
isn't just a similar situation where it's like this isn't like the master rocking up and being like, yeah, we were childhood friends, but this scheme is like this master's deal, and this master's different from the previous master in different ways, even though there is still a history there. This makes it clear, like, no, this is the same character, and this story is continuing from that one First Doctor story 57 years ago.
yeah, for sure. I think it's those little moments that really sort of help to establish a toy maker. And when he gives all those chilling details in that
Yeah.
conversation where he's like, yeah, the master begged me for life, so he lost and I took him and put him into a tiny little gold tooth. See? Ding, um it's that scene, it's one of many where it is quite unsettling, and it's, as I know I sort of said earlier that it's hard for me to separate Barney Stinson from this performance, but that's definitely one of the moments where everything's sort of allowed to simmer down and MPH is allowed to do more pretty chilling, serious stuff, which is kind of great.
Well, I think it's
So
those scenes where he's speaking in that genuinely quite good British accent,
yeah, it's pretty good.
and he's like really, really channeling Michael Gough in those moments.
Mm.
I think those are the moments that really stand out as like, no, this is the toy maker. This is not Neil Patrick Harris's toy maker.
Mm.
This is the same
Yeah,
character.
yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense, and I think, um, like even the silliest stuff, like the really fake German accent, you'd still need it, right? You need
Yeah,
to
yeah.
have all these dimensions with a toy maker. You need to be able to, like, the audience needs to keep guessing. Who is this guy?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And
And having
that
that facade is
yeah, and
important.
that plays into the Spice Up Your Life sequence where, like, in
Yes.
general, it's a very, like, goofy and wacky, like, lip sync, but then throughout it, we get, like, maybe the most chilling death of a side of, like, a background act character we've ever had. We're just, like, instantly turned into screaming balls. Like,
I
good
I love that
God.
scene so
Yeah.
much. So much. I can't believe, I almost can't believe that RTD had the guts to actually do that
Mm.
and to pull it off in the way that he did, because that scene is so well executed for me. Every element, the direction, the editing, MPH's performance, all of it is sort of working towards this same.
Mm.
I think the tone is the
Yeah,
overarching thing for me,
exactly, yeah.
because
It's the dichotomy of this, goofy song playing with this jazzy music combined with like the horrific actions that are happening to some background characters, the fact that he's like toying with Kate and Mel, and then in the background, as soon as he turns the unit soldiers into screaming balls, you're like, okay, no, this is
yeah,
all just a game to him. I don't know what he's gonna do next. What the
it's that
fuck is this character? It's so good.
it's the brilliant combination of absurdity and the uncanny horror of the
Yes.
situation, which
Yeah.
I think is brilliantly executed. There's that bit where he basically swings Kate Stewart around and she smacks her head against the wall. I thought she was almost dead for a minute there. That freaked me out. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Mm.
And honestly, like in terms of that sort of combination of the horror and absurdity, honestly, Cuff, it reminds me of some of the stuff from A Clockwork Orange, and as you know, A Clockwork Orange is my favorite film, so I don't think I can give that scene any higher praise than that.
Wow, that's really impressive.
Like it
I mean,
really,
no, I understand. I see where you're coming from. Yeah, for me, it's like it's ramping up what's chilling about the Voodoo Child sequence in The Sound of Drums,
yeah, yeah.
where
I think,
the Doctor like sort of blasts Voodoo Child while 6 billion alien death spheres rain hell on the planet.
yeah,
It's like that, but ramped up, and it's a lot more like personal and in your face, which makes it even more intense.
yeah. I was gonna say, I think that, um, as much as I love the, Here Come the Drums scene and how, how much dramatic weight that has in terms of, the overall season arc in that season. In terms of the moment itself and the way it was executed, I actually think that this is better than Here Come the Drums for me.
I get that. Yeah, I think I might agree with you.
Yeah. Like I
Like,
again I
Here
couldn't
Come the
believe the
Drums, it's like really, really just relying on that disparity between what you're hearing and what you're seeing. But with this, there's like way more layers and different elements playing off against each other in this like
yeah.
beautiful, chaotic harmony.
Yeah. It's yeah, it's that element of controlled chaos to the point where it's one of a couple of scenes, but this scene in particular, it made me feel queasy watching it, and
Mm,
that's great. I can't, like, as a viewer, I can't tell you how much I love it when a scene can sort of evoke that sort of visceral feeling within me. That's just,
yeah.
it's one of the moments there's several other moments too, but it's one of the moments in this episode where I got chills. I'm like, man, you're
Well,
like
I think
Doctor Who.
it also shows like you can do stuff like this, but there has to be like this is the difference between RTD and Chibnall as a writer, right?
Hmm.
Like, because even in his last episode, something that we both spoke highly of, at least compared to everything else, was the Rah Rah Rasputin dance that the Master does. And yes, that is an example of the like jazzy, upbeat song contrasting with the horrific things that are about to happen. But like that's all it is.
Yeah.
Whereas here, there's so much more going on.
Yeah, it's way more character driven. It is that understanding I think that RTD has that, Doctor Who is a very sort of spectacle heavy show, but in order for that spectacle to work, it has to be grounded in something deeper, whether it be the
Yeah,
plot or characterization or theme, and you kind of get a mix of all of them in this scene,
yeah.
which is just great. Like
And
that
this,
for me. Sorry, go ahead.
no, you finish up.
That scene for me, I mean, I think in the years to come, that's going to be considered like one of the iconic scenes in certainly modern Doctor Who. Um, so yeah, I just love that scene so much.
Well, this actually brings me neatly onto another comparison I want to make with Power of the Doctor, and
Sure.
that is that the 13th and 14th Doctors both die by getting shot by a laser. Um, with the 13th Doctor gets hit by the Quarks in a final moment of fuck you by the Master. And in this situation, the Toymaker invokes the rule of the game by
Mm,
decreeing, I beat one Doctor, I lost to another. This final match should be played with a different Doctor, and then shoots the
mm,
Doctor in the chest with the I forget what it's called, the galvanic laser.
yeah,
Um, you can appreciate one over the other. The
yeah,
the Toymaker's shooting of the Doctor is like bound by the rules of that character. It makes perfect sense.
yeah,
And it fits into the larger story as a whole.
mm,
In terms of the way the 13th Doctor goes out, it fits with the character of that Master at least being a spiteful prick. Um,
mm,
but it doesn't really play into the story. I think I said it at the time where
yeah,
it's like the Doctor might as well have just been shot by a gun at that point. Like, there's no
mm,
reason it needed to be that. She wasn't doing it to save anyone. And granted, 14 wasn't doing it to save anyone either. But again, it's like building on that history, building on that lore. With the
yeah,
Master shooting the Doctor, it ignores the history with the characters and just reduces the Master down to a spiteful prick, like I said.
mm,
And it's genuinely shocking when the 14th Doctor gets shot this like at that moment because you don't see it coming. You're like, okay, so they're going to play their game, and then at the end of it, the Toymaker's going to do something that's going to cause the Doctor to regenerate.
mm,
Um, but for me, I was getting really excited when this happened because for years I've wanted Doctor Who to do this thing, and it would never work in any other context, and that is like have a new Doctor solve the conflict that the previous Doctor is trying to complete, but
mm,
but they had to regenerate during the process, right? Like you've
yeah,
never seen that before. Normally, it's I've resolved everything, and at the end, I die.
yeah,
With this, it's a complete reversal of that, and I think that's why initially the whole bi-generation thing threw me for a loop, and I wasn't really digging it
mm-hmm,
because I was like, "Oh, you're robbing me of this really cool thing I've wanted to see." Where it's like the
mm,
14th Doctor dies, and then the 15th Doctor comes in and has to fix everything.
mm,
And you do sort of get that, but not really. And I think that's why I was putting up resistance initially, and also because I had heard about the leak where uh this was leaked in advance. I don't know if you know about that, but
no, I don't, and I didn't see the leak certainly.
yeah. So I didn't see it. I heard about it from someone else, but basically in
Okay.
advance of the Star Beast, there was a leaker who gave a whole bunch of plot details on all three specials. And it included the bi-generation thing. And people were like, oh, that's stupid, just because on paper it does sound kind of stupid. Um, but then when a bunch of stuff they predicted about Star Beast came true, people were then like, oh
Mm.
no, what if that happens? And I think it is the kind of thing where it's like, on paper it does sound dumb, but like you need to consider it like in terms of what it does for the characters in the moment.
Yeah,
Because the
yeah.
main thing that it does, and again we've talked about it a little bit, but that scene with 14 and 15 talking in the TARDIS about self therapy basically, and
Mm,
how they've never been able to like just stop and like process everything that's happened to them,
mm-hmm,
and now like this has a chance, like it's basically giving the Doctor therapy. It's like
yeah,
you heal, I'll go off and keep being the Doctor because I'm fine. Like I've been through the same stuff as you, but it's clearly affecting you more because you've returned to an old face, and just David Tennant's Doctor in general felt the weight of it all so much more than any other Doctor has.
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's making sense. That, and we might touch on this a bit more briefly, but that kind of gets to something I mentioned earlier. There were some elements of the bi-generation that I found a little confusing.
Yeah.
And that line where, what is it? Like Shruti says that, um, that, I'm fine now because like you fixed yourself. And I wasn't sure what that line meant. I thought, does that mean that Shruti was Doctor's like a future incarnation coming to the past, or you know what I mean? Like I
Yeah, no,
just,
it's there's certainly a bunch of different ways it could be interpreted initially. Um, I think that well, I don't know what I think. Like, it's difficult because I think it is more of a thing of like, okay, the Doctor split himself into one. As one Doctor can slow down like they desperately need to, and the other
yeah,
Doctor can keep fixing problems.
yeah,
That's all it is for me. I don't think there's anything deeper than that. I don't think we're ever going to
mm,
get like we're going to revisit David Tennant's Doctor and he's going to regenerate into Shooty Godwell, and then the previous Shooty God was going to vanish. I don't think there's anything like that going to happen.
yeah. I think, and maybe this is one of the things that I had, like one of the issues with the bi-generation. Maybe I just wanted a little bit more clarity because I
Well,
think,
yeah,
oh, does this like is this like a reference to something that's going to happen in the future? Is this some groundwork that RTD is laying here? But I just like for the as we said for the text itself, maybe I just wanted a little bit more clarity on how the bi-generation works.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, there's
yeah,
certainly no. That's certainly something that I'm 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 not quite there yet either. Like, there are still a lot of unanswered questions surrounding
yeah,
this whole new regeneration mechanic.
yeah,
Um, it's tough, right?
mm.
Because on one hand, you could say it's really good to see David Tennant's Doctor have a happy ending.
Yeah. I was so impressed how satisfying that ending was.
Oh no, it's incredibly satisfying, right? Like,
Yeah,
actually getting to see a Doctor like settle down for once.
yeah, and I
But then you
yeah
can very much easily say, well, no. On the other hand, that betrays the whole purpose of regeneration, which is to, uh, you know, one thing ends, a new thing begins. But now that first thing isn't ending. There's
yeah,
like I said, there are a whole bunch of different ways you can look at it, and each are pretty valid at the moment because again, we
mm,
don't have all the answers.
yeah,
But like, I think personally, just looking at this episode and what this episode gives us, seeing David Tennant's Doctor happy and satisfied with his family, and they get to go on little TARDIS trips every now and then, but he in general gets to slow down. Especially giving the history of that Doctor, I'm very happy with how it wrapped up.
yeah. I'd agree. I think, and I know in the past I've criticized particularly the Moffat era for using sentimentality in a way that felt forced and kind of frustrating. That's not what this is at all. This is like, I think in when we did Girl on the Fireplace, I said that I really like sentimentality when it's used well and when it feels, earnest and considered and whatnot.
Mm,
And in the Moffat era there were problems with that, but this is absolutely an truly earned piece of sentimentality that it just works. Like, I know, as you say, maybe there are some uh you know canon issues with how the bi-generation fits into the whole picture, but in terms of like an ending and a
mm.
character arc for this Doctor, that felt really, really satisfying. And it got better the more I watched the episode. I watched it today and I'm like, God, that just feels right. That gives me that wonderful, warm, fuzzy feeling that
Yeah,
I really love. And again, it feels so real and authentic and earned. It doesn't feel cheap in any way because God, that like giving Tennant like a happy ending that's as conclusively happy as that, I think that could have been so easy to mess up and just
oh
make
yeah,
it feel cheap and played out and not earned, but it just works.
yeah,
And again, this is why I say I admire the writing so much here. I admire the risks and how many of them are paying off. Because again, to do that, to give, this Doctor such a happy ending, especially when, he's been characterized in the past, I mean, the Doctor generally, but this Doctor specifically as, the man who keeps running. The
Well,
idea of giving him
not
sorry,
just
yeah.
that, but also David Tennant by far the loneliest of all the Doctors.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah, actually that does kind of make sense. So yeah, like putting all that together, the fact that he now can stop running and that he can stop, sort of being mired in his loneliness. Um, it would have been easy to mess it up, but God, it just feels so great here. It's
Mm.
so it's so satisfying. So yeah.
Yeah. Um, I want to talk really, really quickly about the implications that RTD has teased about bi-generation
Yeah.
outside of this episode. And I mentioned earlier that the only real ways that this impacts the larger Doctor Who universe, as in everything prior to this, is by affecting the multiverse. And he has
Mm,
gone on record as saying something along the lines of
mhm,
this the introduction of bi-generation means that in another world, every previous Doctor bi-generated instead of regenerated, which means there's a world in the Doctor Who multiverse, which again has been a thing for a while,
mm,
where William Hartnell bi-generated into Patrick Troughton, or in a different one, John Pertwee bi-generated into Tom Baker, or in another one,
right.
the War Doctor bi-generated into Chris Eccleston.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that's where a lot of people are going, oh, I don't know about
Yeah.
that. And to a certain extent, I kind of agree as well, but I don't think it's really going to impact the show, like, as a whole. I don't think this is going to be an excuse to, like, at the end of series 14, cheaply open up a portal and in comes Peter Davison from a universe where he regenerated into Colin Baker by splitting himself in two. That's not what they're doing.
Mm,
Um, I think there are some people who are being like that Tales from the TARDIS TV show they put out like a month ago where there was
mm,
like previous companions and doctors talking to each other. That's how that makes sense now. Or maybe this is why like certain elements of Big Finish have not always been consistent with the show's canon. Maybe that's why that makes sense now. And
yeah.
for me, I'm just more sort of like a okay, it's cool that this thing is now affecting the multiverse, but like the Doctor Who multiverse has already been described as infinite. So, like, yes, obviously, if this is now a concept, then it would obviously have applied to the multiverse as well. But I
Yeah.
really just don't think it's really ever going to be that important to the show.
Right.
At the very least, like, it's not going to be this, like, game changing thing where it's like, oh, now it's all about bi generation. Regeneration doesn't matter anymore. No, no, no. It's just this thing that happened once in this universe and is incredibly rare to the point where it's never happened before. And therefore,
Yeah.
there's a universe out there where for every incarnation of the Doctor, it's the first time it happened and it's the only time it happened. That's all that really means. It's just another whole
Yeah.
infinite multiverse of possibilities where each decision creates a new universe. That's all it is.
Yeah. I think. Yeah. No. That does make sense. And I think in a way, given that this, it's after the Timeless Child revelation, and it's,
Oh god, yeah.
after, they literally just fought the Toymaker. If this was going to happen, it was going to happen now with
Well,
the.
especially for a 60th anniversary, like this was the
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah. For sure. I think. Like Shooting was Doctor even says, we may still be sort of experiencing the lingering effects of the Toymaker. I mean, it's never directly stated, but you could even argue maybe that's one of the reasons why the bi-generation happened.
Maybe, yeah.
Even if it's not the only reason. So again, if you're going to do this, it's going to be now.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I suppose I don't know. Is it meant to be? I wouldn't say largely symbolic, but I wonder if there is a symbolic element going on here, like it is like a passing of the torch, and it's literally the Doctor sort of leaving their past behind, if that makes sense. I'm
I
not
think
sure
that
if it's
there might be some element of that, and maybe
mm,
that is also why in like the behind the scenes of production for the next series they're considering it season one.
Yeah.
It's never ever going to be called Series 1. It's always going to be Series 14 forever and ever. But the same thing happened when Matt Smith took over. Production changed so much behind the scenes. Like, very few of the production crew stuck around. And they were like, let's just call this Season 1. It's a good jumping on point for new viewers anyway, so who cares? Like, that's all it really is. Like, it's not...
Yeah.
Like, I think people are generally overreacting about, like, how, like, world breaking this is. It really isn't. It's just a thing that happened once.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said, it wasn't even as canon breaking as I was expecting to be. It wasn't as
No,
canon breaking as RTD was making it out to be, in my view.
no.
I think, I certainly don't think it's trying to, like, do away with the past. It's not
No.
trying to, retcon, massive chunks of Doctor Who's very long history. I mean,
It's given us a new Doctor with slightly less baggage, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
yeah, no, I don't think so either. And I
Because
think,
he still went through all of that stuff. It's
yeah,
kind of like how Peter Capaldi's Doctor very rarely mentioned the Time War, unlike his previous incarnations, but like it still clearly had an effect on him. I just
yeah,
think it's going to be a similar thing with this, like
yeah,
where Shooty's Doctor is very rarely going to be like, oh, and I've still got wounds from. Actually, this is actually really clever because he's not going to be like, and I'm the timeless child, and I don't know who I am. Like,
mm,
he's not going to do any of that stuff, but it still happened to him. So I think,
mm.
honestly, I think that's a really clever way of like semi ignoring a bunch of the weird fucky stuff Chibnall did while still acknowledging it still happened.
Yeah. This might be a weird metaphor, but in a way, maybe it's symbolically meant to represent, the ending of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament, if that
I mean,
makes
it
any
could be.
sense.
Look,
But sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I think for me, it's like we don't really know what this means until we watch the next season.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, like,
And there are two ways you can interpret that. There's,
mm,
oh, I'm actually really excited for the potential of what this means, or, oh, I'm dreading what this means now for the rest of the show. And I think in general, we're both a little more optimistic about it.
yeah, I agree. I mean, look, I'll be honest. Maybe I am a little nervous because again, the changes are just so big.
Well, yeah,
Um,
of course.
And we honestly probably should have anticipated that, given it's the 60th and it's RTD.
Yeah.
Weird shit was going to go down. But I think I am, yeah, a little bit nervous. But I am, as you say, mostly optimistic about this because I think, yes, maybe this is changing from the Old Testament to the New Testament. But as with most versions of the Bible, both books are important. If that makes sense.
Well, yeah, and I also think that in general, we have to give a bit of credit to RTD based on his back catalogue, because when you think about it, and it seems like really old hat to us now,
Mm.
but at the start of the 2005 era, destroying Gallifrey off screen was a big risk.
Yeah.
The Time War was a big
Yeah.
risk, and it paid off. And it led to some really, really great stuff that is
Hmm.
celebrated and is well received and is good storytelling.
Yeah.
And other showrunners just haven't been able to do that. And I'm not even specifically calling out Chibnall here. I'm someone who doesn't
Oh,
even think the Moffat era is garbage, but he could not string together a series long or multiple series long story arc to save his life, with one or two possible exceptions.
yeah.
And even that's largely up for
Mm,
debate. Like,
mm.
when Russell T Davies makes a massive swing with the canon, it generally pays off.
For sure. I think he really is good at doing those overarching, the season arcs, and
Yeah.
I think, I suppose, like, whatever, big risks he was going to take with the 60th, the attitude I have there is the same attitude I have to the show's future, which is, if there is a showrunner I can trust to take these big risks and have them pay off, it's RTD. Like, I trust his writing instincts on this stuff. I
Yeah.
may not, and look, that doesn't mean that I have to like every single creative
No, of
decision he
course not.
makes or everything
Yeah,
that the writers work for him, all the creative decisions that they make.
of
I'm certainly
course.
gonna, be honest if I find problems with it. But generally speaking, he's got the talent and the vista and the not just the ambition, but the true ability to execute that vision in a way that really works. And this is proven, I think, with this episode specifically, and this goes to one of the main points I wanted to bring up here. Given the risks that are taken in the story, and, as we've established, pretty big risks are taken here with,
Yeah.
in terms of not just, like, obviously with canon, but also in terms of plot, in terms of pacing, in terms of tone, in terms of style, even genre in its own way. Given all of these risks that have been taken, the fact that most of them are paying off is one, it's testament to, RTD's writing ability, I think.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, I think, whatever criticisms I may have had with the Star Beast, this is a really super strong story for me, certainly like in the technical elements of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and even the risks that aren't quite paying off for me, again, I go back to some of the political commentary, and the fact that the bi-generation, maybe we could have had some more clarity on it. Even with those things, the fact that he's taking these risks at all in this really decisive way, for those reasons, this may be the most Doctor Who a Doctor Who episode has been for quite a while for me. I
No,
know
I
that
get that. Yeah, I get that.
because I know I talk about it, I talk a lot about, artistic risks and how, much how important that is to me when I look at not just Doctor Who, but art generally. But Doctor Who in particular, as formulaic as it can be, as I've said before, with Doctor Who, you can kind of do almost anything.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you want, when you see these weird, crazy risks, whether they're pulled off or not, um, it's really great to see them happen. And the fact that we not only get that risk taking here, but
Mm.
that it also is pulled off as well as it um, is really, really special and really
Well,
exciting. And it,
those
sorry, go.
risks those risks are the reason we get to celebrate a 60th anniversary in the first place.
For sure. Absolutely. That's what, in a way, that's kind of what Doctor Who's built on. It's
Yes,
taking
exactly.
those risks. It's the fact that regeneration, like I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some piece of old literature I'm not aware of, but that was a pretty unique concept for television in the 60s.
Oh
So,
no, like from everything I've heard, when that happened at the first time in 1966, people went nuts.
yeah. Like, it's wild that, you know, like 60 years was building up to this, but you think, well, yeah, 60 years was building up to
Of course it
this.
was. Yeah, yeah.
And the
Um,
fact that, yes, the bi-generation, yes, that's a new and maybe even seemingly a scary thing because it is so new, but like, in a way, I think we just got to trust the process. Doctor
no,
Who
100%.
has taken weird risks like this before. It's the reason why it was successful, and I think to an extent we just got to go along with it. As the second Doctor said, life depends on change and renewal. So, you know, fuck it, man. Let's go with it. I'm excited.
And I know that there
Um,
are going to be some people saying, "Why is this a good risk to take, but Timeless Child wasn't?" And I think it's just all based around like I said, the character side of things.
mm,
Chris Chibnall took a massive risk in changing the Doctor's history, and then it didn't have any lasting impact on the Doctor at all. Like it
mm,
didn't affect the character moving forward. It didn't affect the storytelling moving forward.
yeah,
It contradicted canon to a massive degree, and also it was well, not just that, but it contradicted its own story arc that it was telling in its own season,
yeah,
and it also just it rewrote the show's history in a way that made it less interesting.
yeah. It
With
was
with this, it's again a massive risk. It doesn't rewrite the show's history, but it adds to it, which
yeah,
is I think the main difference.
yeah,
It sets us up for new storytelling possibilities in the future.
mm,
Um, it's a new idea that doesn't necessarily overwrite canon,
hmm,
but it gives it a little appendix, and I think that's the main difference.
yeah, sure. Um, Yeah, no, I think that all makes sense.
Mm.
Yeah, like the timeless, like at the very least, and I know like this might sound a bit vague, but at the very least, when I look at something like the Timeless Child arc, at comparing it to these new crazy developments, these developments feel like they're really considered, whereas the Timeless Child arc, it just felt like, oh, here's this random wacky twist because wacky twist.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it just
Oh yeah.
doesn't. it didn't feel well thought out. This does. This like you really get the impression that RTD has really thought this through. He
Hmm.
has, I think, a lot of respect for the show, and he's not going to throw a massive spanner in the works without seriously considering, its implications and what he can do
Hmm.
with it.
And I
Same
think
thing with
maybe
the
do you
Time
think
War.
well, do you think maybe in general that's one of the reasons why some people are kind of hesitant on the bi-generation gimmick, maybe because they've already been burnt by Timeless Child so recently. Like I'm sure, like again, I'm sure there are some reasons why people genuinely don't like this bi-generation twist.
Mm.
But do you think there is an element of it that is like, oh, we've seen this kind of thing recently, don't do it again?
Yeah, I think to an extent. I mean, I even sort of flagged that earlier. It's like, yeah, I've been
Yeah.
burned. I've been burned once, RTD. Don't hurt me like I've been hurt before. Um,
You were supposed to be different.
you were the chosen one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I think that's probably a large part of it. In terms of like more legitimate criticisms, as you say, I think we're just gonna have to really wait and see how this plays
Yeah.
out before we, count our
Well,
chickens, so to
I think
speak.
another thing that really excited me about this was admittedly a piece of headcanon that I had, and it's something that a lot
Mm.
of people have had a similar thought about. And it's the possibility of the 14th Doctor as he is eventually dying and regenerating into a young Tom Baker, who then retires and becomes the curator of the Undergallery,
Yeah.
who's the character that appears in the 50th anniversary special.
Mm.
Because again, that is a character that we have never had an explanation of why they're there and who they are. If this can explain that retroactively, I'm all for it.
Yeah, that'd be cool, actually. And it would really work.
Yeah, and it would make sense. Like that Tom
Hmm.
Baker's doctor in that moment said, in years to come, you may find yourself revisiting a few old faces, but just the old favorites.
Yeah,
Again, that would line up if they
that
return
would.
and regenerates into Tom Baker. If this doctor is like someone who's just going to exist on Earth and live like a quiet life until they run out of regenerations, if they even can, but their regenerations like they keep revisiting the past, which again would make sense for self healing. It's like I'm going
Hmm.
back to my previous faces and I'm like sitting with them for a while and I'm letting their experiences catch up to me and actually like
For
have a resounding
sure.
effect on me beyond just running from them, and I'm actually like healing from them by revisiting these
Hmm.
faces. I think that, and that is consistent with why this face returned, right?
Hmm.
The reason that they give, it wasn't a plot reason as we thought it might be, it was a character reason,
Yeah, it
which
was
is consistent.
thematic.
And
Yeah.
it's consistent with how regenerations have worked in the past. Like Peter Capaldi, he became that face because he had to remind himself to keep saving people, and as well executed as that may or may not have been, it's now consistent with how we know regeneration can work, where the doctor's very biology can recognize something's not right
Hmm.
and the regeneration can help to remedy that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think I honestly, now that you've laid that all out, Cuff, I do hope that is how it turns out because I think that that would work really, really well.
Mm.
Um, and again, be really satisfying. I think would be,
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
would be really great. I want to deal
Briefly,
with.
sorry,
Oh,
really quickly,
sorry, yeah.
briefly going back to that final scene in the backyard. It
Mm.
it did sting a little bit that Wilf couldn't be there because that would have just
Yeah,
made that scene just that little bit more
perfect.
perfect. I know.
Oh,
That's
it would have been.
the one thing that scene was missing was Bernard Cribbins, and it's such a
Yeah,
shame that he couldn't be there to film that.
yeah, yeah.
Because like
That's,
largely that I think based on these episodes, and it's possible that huge things were rewritten, but based on the way these episodes have been structured, he only missed filming two scenes: the
mm,
beginning of this episode and the end of this episode.
mm,
They used archival footage or audio to have Bernard or Wilf shout out, "You go with the doctor, Donna," right
mm,
as as unit was picking them up. Um,
mm.
because I dare say they would not have taken Wilf with them to units. I think that would have been a mistake.
Yeah,
Um, but like he definitely needed to be there in the garden. That was absolutely in the original script.
mm. Yeah,
It
for
would
sure.
have been really great to have
It
that
would
in
have,
there.
it would have been perfect.
Yeah,
Um, Rest in peace, indeed.
yeah, definitely.
Um, so yeah, I think, um, what was I going to say? Oh no, okay, I remember now. There
Good.
is one problem that I have with the plot that I want to bring up,
Yeah, go
and
for it.
maybe you can help clarify this a little bit.
Oh,
Maybe I just wasn't.
Yeah, I'll do my best.
understanding it. But so the doctor says to the toy maker, "Okay, I won the game. Here's my prize. Get the hell out of this universe forever." He
Yep.
does, and then there's a flashback to 1925, and the doll's head gets set on fire. But it seemed to me that it was implying that the giggle got sort of erased from human history, like because the toy maker got basically banished from the universe, that he wasn't there to put the giggle into the TV to begin with. So that made me think, well, doesn't that create a paradox? Like how are they
Maybe.
still remembering all of these things if the
I
toy
think
maker was never there to begin with to instigate the whole thing?
I think my implication with that, or the implication I got from that scene, was that it just ended the hold that the toy maker had over John Logie Baird's assistant, because he was then back in his own body. I didn't pick up that they were trying to imply the giggle was,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
like the
Actually,
destruction, because the destruction around them in London is clearly still present, and the
yeah,
events clearly still happen. So I don't think it was trying to imply that the giggle had suddenly been erased. I think
yeah. It was
it's
more
just,
like
yeah, it was
it's
more that
gone for then, for
the toy
2023.
yeah, it's the toy maker's, like, the giggles is still, like, there burned into every television, but without the toy maker present to activate it, it's not gonna be a danger in the future.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, and I hadn't thought. Yeah, giving the Lucky Bed's assistant, giving him, you know, sort of a happy ending, so he's not a puppet.
Yeah,
That actually makes
thank
sense
God,
as to
right?
why they would. Yeah, because when you think about it, if they didn't show that, that would have been really uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
That would have been fucked. So no, that okay, that makes more sense. I think again, and maybe I am slightly hyper vigilant because I am like burned because of the timeless child, but I'm like, oh god, what if there's some terrible oversight that RTD is not
No,
thinking
no.
about here? you know?
Well, again, like, I'm not sure which interpretation is valid, but I think based on the fact that no one in London is suddenly like, "Oh, why is everything on fire?" It's more
Yeah.
than likely than not my
Yeah,
interpretation.
because yeah, I think again, like if it was if my interpretation, my initial one was correct, again, that whole thing, the whole episode would have been a paradox because obviously
Yeah.
that instigates every single uh you know plot point,
Yeah,
right? So the
exactly.
whole thing would have to be negated. And now that you've explained, I'm like, yeah, there's no way RTD would have been dumb enough to
No,
to
no,
make
no.
that kind of a mistake. Again, I think I know we keep coming back to this, but I think I've just been burned by the Timeless Child arc, and
Yeah, yeah.
I'm hyper vigilant, and I think, oh god,
Oh,
what
we
if?
need to be, though. We need to be, because we can't, like. Yes, we can hold RTD to a higher standard, but we can't use that to, like, overlook genuine writing mistakes.
Yeah,
We
for
need to
sure,
stay on
for
the
sure.
lookout for them, but yeah, don't.
Mm.
There's a balance to find.
Yeah, and I think, well, and in a way, like we did talk about this before, that ending, the very very end of the Star Beast just felt so rushed
Well,
that
yes,
those things obviously
those are
if there
still
are problems.
problems. Yeah.
Yeah, if there are problems with the writing, we still need to be honest about them. But at the same time, it it would be good if I could sort of get over that state of hypervigilance. But
Well, yeah, and
the good,
maybe in time,
mm,
we'll get there. But I think, like, we more than anyone know that RTD is not impervious to bad writing. We've reviewed some
yeah,
of his stories before. We haven't spoken highly of many of them.
yeah,
Boomtown remains the lowest rated episode by me in this podcast,
mm,
and it might keep that crown for some time. Um,
mhm.
but that's just all about, like, just trying to, especially because we are quote unquote professional critics. It's just about.
I'm sorry, I had to laugh at that. But
Yeah,
anyway,
that's good. It's just the balance to find, I suppose. If you've got no more notes, there's a few things we need to do to wrap up this episode.
yeah, I think that's about it.
Cool.
I'll just say that again, I think we just sort of have to trust the writing and trust that RTD, especially with the bigger story arcs, he can sort of make it work. So, like, and by the end of this episode, I thought, okay, I think I can get over my state of hypervigilance. So,
Sure, sure.
yeah. Anyway,
I'm going to give the giggle an 8 out of 10.
cool. Oh, did we want to do our predictions?
We'll get to that.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10 as well.
Cool.
I think whatever however shocked I was with the big revelations, it's grown on me even since watching it, and even in that initial viewing, I thought, man, there's so much to love about this episode. The
Yeah.
very least that I can say is that even if this is a classic case of, a Doctor Who story being, the sum being greater than the whole, the
Hmm.
elements of that sum are fantastic, and even then, the overall package is still really good. I mean, like again, tiny little things I had issue with the commentary. Yeah, I want more clarity with the bi-generation, and maybe a longer running time could have helped with both of those things, but
Yes.
generally speaking, Doctor Who is back, man.
It's back. I'm so happy.
This feels like Doctor Who, and not
Yeah.
even just in the surface level. Oh, they're on a happy sci-fi romp. Great, it's Doctor Who again.
Mm-hmm.
No, this feels real. This feels like the show that I grew up with, both with the revival and even the classic series. So honestly, whatever weird, wacky adventures, whatever twists we see in the future, like bring it on, man. I'm excited.
Yeah. Let's go over our predictions.
Sure.
We were pretty off the mark on a lot of cases here.
Yeah, there
Um,
was some stuff that neither of us remotely predicted
yeah, I'm just
could
gonna run
happen.
through these. I'm gonna run through these in order from lowest point value to highest point value. The
Sure.
lowest prediction we had was mine, and it was the 14th Doctor's last words are "Now I'm ready to go." That didn't happen. Technically, his last words pre by generation were Alon Z, which translates as "Let's go."
Huh.
And the initial spin on I Don't Want to Go was about twisting Alon Z to make it heartbreaking. But
Huh.
I don't think I'm claiming this.
Yeah, that's fair. Fair enough.
So that's 25 points gone. Oh, boo hoo. I'm never going to see them again. The next lowest is your next prediction at 150 points. The toy maker will create a dreamscape with the lines between reality and dream becoming blurred. I don't think that happened.
No, I don't think so either. I think
No, yeah.
because
I think
I
that
think for sorry, go
with
ahead.
your thing, I imagine it was like a we don't know what we can believe, what's real and what's not. Whereas with this, it's just
Yeah.
oh no, the toy maker's just fucking with reality.
Yeah. It's like the Doctor establishes that um the toy maker can do weird fucky things with reality, but it's still reality.
Yes,
It's not a dream. The Doctor's not trapped in the Matrix. It's not like you know the whole section of
it's not lonely assassin. It's not deadly assassin.
Deadly Assassin. Yes, exactly. That's not what's happening here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Um.
don't mind not getting that.
Yep. And I'm also not giving you the toy maker as a time lord because he's not.
Nope.
So there goes 250 points.
Hmm.
The next one is again yours. 350 points. Beat the Meat Redemption arc. Didn't happen.
Nope. Definitely didn't happen.
Wide of the mark. We also didn't get a Moffat style montage showing previous Doctors. There were like brief clips from the Celestial Toymaker with Michael Gough and William
Mm.
Hartnell. So if
Yeah.
we want to be like really really lenient, we could give you that. But I don't think this was in the spirit of what you were talking.
No, no, I don't think so either. Like again, when I said a Moffat style montage, I meant like a Moffat style montage, and you know what I mean when I'm talking about
Yes,
that.
as in all the Doctors' faces back to back to back with swelling music.
Yeah, yeah, basically.
My prediction from which was validated in the Star Beast, I think that stands. So Donna is allowed to keep her memories but doesn't die.
Yep, sure.
Very, very fair. Your final prediction was Donna will sacrifice her life to save the day. Didn't happen.
Nope.
Again, we could be lenient and say, well, she tried to sacrifice her life in the Star Beast, and her actions did save the day.
I don't.
But
No, I don't
even at the
think.
time, you recognized that it wasn't in the spirit of the
Yeah,
initial
no,
prediction you
no,
made.
that's not the spirit of what I was saying.
Yeah,
It would have to have been her like actually dying and the big impact of that. So yeah, that's I don't mind.
yeah. I don't
Sacrificing
get
that.
five. I don't get 550 points for past Doctors only appear through a flashback montage showing previous games conducted by the toy maker. In fact, we now know that we have seen all three games conducted by the toy maker, so
Hmm.
didn't happen. I also lose 700 points, or I don't get 700 points because we didn't see Martha working at Unit. Devastated, but we got a classic companion working there instead. So
Hmm.
I'm not gonna stamp my boots and throw my
Yeah,
toys
yeah,
at the pram over that. And
sure.
I also don't get 1,100,000 points for everything since Twice Upon a Time getting retconned. In fact,
Yeah.
they very much doubled down on that in
Yep.
many ways.
Yep, they certainly did.
We both knew I wasn't getting those points. I'm not
No.
going to lose sleep over them.
No, no, no.
So the final score is 400-0 with me taking that contest.
Congrats.
Thank you. We next time we'll organize a prize, but it means nothing. It's just a bit of fun.
Best of 3.
Best of 3. Who won that? Who won the? Who had the most points from Power of the Doctor?
I'm pretty sure it was you.
Okay, great. Well, I've already won that, so give me a TARDIS, Fitz. So, one last thing before we wrap this episode up. Now, there were quite a few unresolved plot threads from the 60th episodes. For example, the Beep the Meep's boss wasn't the toy maker.
Yeah.
That is apparent. That is presumably something that Series 14 is going to tackle, or perhaps something after that.
Yeah. I mean,
but likewise,
yeah,
there also is a figure out there that even the toy maker is scared of.
Yeah, which is wild. Like when he references the one who waits, ooh, who the hell is this?
Yeah.
Because
do we think those are the same person?
I'm going to tentatively say yes.
Uh-huh.
Because to have 2 references near the end of an episode by a defeated villain in that way, it feels too convenient not to be a unified piece of foreshadowing.
Sure, but here's the thing. When the Toymaker references the one who waits, that wasn't at the end of the story. That was roughly in the middle. The reference the Toymaker makes at the end of the episode was "My legions are coming."
That's right. Yes, sorry.
Which is again another different thing.
Yeah.
I would also be very surprised if this. I'm gonna assume Eldritch being that even scares the Toymaker has got the Meep in his employ. I don't.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
My guess at this point is that all 3 of these things are different. I think the Meep's boss, the Toymaker's legions, and the one who waits are all different entities.
Sure.
And it might even be multiple seasons before some of these get.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Given RTD's history, that would make sense.
Well, yeah, but in general, the reveal that the Toymaker isn't the Meep's boss actually made me really excited because, again, to me, it just continually justified like all these different things that happened over the 60th specials. Like using the Meep initially, it's like, okay, no, there's a reason for that, and we're going to find out why later on. It's not just the Meep was there to set up the Toymaker, 2 characters that have never had any interaction in even the extended media, and were just shoehorned in because they're both in some ways previous.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes sense.
Yeah. The other thing this special setup is the return of the Master in a very tongue-in-cheek way.
Oh, I was wondering when we were going to cover this.
Yeah. So in exactly the same fashion as the Last of the Time Lords, we see a hand with red fingernails picking up the Toymaker's golden tooth, and we hear the Master's laughing. I don't think this is going to lead to another sequence where the secret books of Saxon are invoked to bring the Master back. I think this is just okay, this is the Master's contingency plan. We're going to see the Master again in the future. I don't even necessarily think it's going to be next season. I think it's just going to be, don't worry, the Master's not dead. Obviously, the Master's not dead. We're going to see them again at some point.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and initially it made me a little bit nervous. Maybe, again, I was just getting some flashbacks to, in this case, the cult of Saxon. I'm thinking,
yeah.
RTD, what are you doing? Please tell me you're not doing the same thing again. But as you say, it's probably more just a tongue-in-cheek.
It's just a reference. Yeah, it's like it's invoking that exact same image to make you go, okay.
Yeah, to realize, the Master, and in a way, that's sort of important because before that, the only reference, like, there's only one reference to say that the Master is trapped inside this tooth. So having that last little visual just sort of helps sort of put the last nail in the coffin to sort of, signify to us that this is something, the Master's coming back, and, we should all be really quite excited about that.
Yeah, as if there was any doubt that the Master was going to come back at some point.
Yeah.
Like, they've died so many fucking times.
Yeah. It doesn't, I think, haven't you even said, like, it doesn't matter how many times the
No,
Master dies, you would always believe that they could come back in some way.
I always
So,
believe that going into any situation, especially with the Doctor involved, the Master has some kind of contingency plan in place in case that things go horribly wrong
yeah,
and they dying. Because the Master almost always is defined by their fear of death.
yeah, for sure.
Like in so many different
Yeah,
ways, like especially huge bulks of the classic series were revolved around the Master trying to subvert the 12 regeneration limit and
yeah,
continue living. So it would not surprise me whatsoever if every single situation the Master goes into, they have a plan for if they die.
yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Um, I want to touch on another thing here.
Yeah.
Murray Gold's score, top
Yes.
notch as always.
Yep.
I couldn't really believe how much, like, I don't know, I didn't realize how much I missed his music, um, until we watched these specials. I think this one in particular, because it's just great. And there are sort of more obvious examples than others, like the horror scenes with the dolls. It works really
Mm.
well. I really really love the creepy children's choir doing
Yeah.
the thing. That's yeah, it just really really works. And even the weird little toy maker arpeggio. It just
Yeah.
really just fits together.
It's also
Just
good to hear the 15th Doctor's theme at the end of the episode as well. Like I
yeah.
can already tell it's going to be something that can be reworked as a motif into multiple different tones and situations, just like a lot of other Doctor themes that he's used in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, another knockout score from Murray Gold. How does he
Yep,
do it?
by being a good composer.
Yeah, that is true. With talent.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, great stuff.
yep, and
Um,
this brings the 60th anniversary specials to a close.
yes, we've got the Christmas special to look forward to. Do we want to briefly go over the little teaser for that? Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
goblins.
Yeah, did you see the Goblin song?
I haven't looked at it yet. I'm trying to watch as little clips as possible because I want to go into this relatively blind.
Sure, it's something else. Yeah.
I believe you.
I mean, I wanted to discuss it, but I'm not going to spoil it for you if you want to
Okay,
go
great.
into that blind.
Yeah, I don't want to watch it yet. I
Yeah,
want to.
that's fair. It's just it's something else.
Well, it's also like I don't know if you saw this, but Russell teased that the next season would have a bit more of a fantasy, or would have like some fantasy elements that the show hasn't maybe used in the past before.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people were like hesitant about that, but with me, I'm like, it's the show's always been multi-genre to some extent. They've they've had fantasy elements in the past, and maybe they're going to ramp up a bit more. But like you said before, you can do anything you want in Doctor Who. So as long as like the general tone of the show remains the same, I don't care what ratio the genres are.
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit I was a little bit nervous when I heard that. I think it might have been because I don't know from where, but I heard that like right after watching this episode for the first time, and maybe the shock of the Five Generation thing made me think, oh, what
Mhm.
weird new things is RTD going to do with the show? How am I going to feel about that?
Yeah, yeah.
But I think, as you say, as long as the core sci-fi elements are still there and that the science sort of remains part of the backbone of it, I think we're still in pretty good hands. And in a way, maybe the fact that the toy maker did come back and again presumably did some weird fucky things with reality, maybe that will make
Yeah,
sense. Like
I
if
think that
fantasy stuff happens.
I think that a lot of this fantasy stuff are going to be what the legions are like. These kind
Yeah,
of like these elements that we haven't seen before, more fantasy based, a bit more like based in
yeah,
magic, or at the very least like reality, like warping shit
yeah.
that
Like
can be
Eldritch
construed as
horrors.
magic. Yeah, eldritch stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
if it leans into
Um.
that, then I'm really looking forward to
Yeah.
it.
I think if it's worked in well enough, and I do trust RTD to work it in well enough, I think it'll be quite special. Also, last little thing that I'd forgot about, just the general way that the toy maker is presented as this very sort of eldritch horror character is done really well. I love the God, I think I've got it written down. I can't find it, but basically, when the doctor says, if I told you that this
Mm,
person could control, the laws of physics with their mind, would you believe me? And then I think Shirley says, yeah, and no, she says, oh, well, is that what's happening? And the doctor says, no,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I love that. That's such a
Yes.
great line. It's saying more with less, and it just gives you such a great picture of who this is. This is such a crazy, terrifying, powerful being that it is in the classic sort of Lovecraftian eldritch sense.
Yes.
It's beyond human comprehension. There's like that phrase, controlling physics with the laws of physics with the power of the mind. That's just a human rationalization. We can't understand how powerful this character is, and it also helps to speak to the fact that I think the Toymaker might be, certainly so far, the most like powerful character in the
Mm,
extended universe.
yes.
Granted, I'm not familiar with all the extended universe stuff with the Big Finish stories and everything, but he's certainly still a powerful character that the Doctor, like, if the Doctor is as scared of him as he is, then man, the Toymaker's got to be serious business, and it's not just with that line; it's throughout the episode as well. They really do a good job of clarifying how powerful and terrifying he is, which is just
Mhm.
great.
Yeah,
So yeah,
they really do use a lot of that. The really really strong evocative language in that regard.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, so that's
Yeah,
it. We're
yep.
done. I'm not certain if we'll do an episode in between, but in
Mhm,
2 weeks we'll be back to review The Church on Ruby Road, the 2023 Christmas special.
mhm,
And the first proper episode of the 15th Doctor's Run, the introduction of Ruby Sunday as a companion, and
mhm.
the worldwide premiere of the Goblin song.
Oh boy,
Until then, I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and
Ha 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 ha.
of course, that's such. Why didn't I think of doing that? That's such the obvious way to wrap it up. And I'm slipping. I'm sorry, guys. I'm God.
Oh, it's all right. We love you anyway, tough.